Hello, I'm going to explain to you today why Greece is in their current crisis state and how the euro is exacerbating the problem. Together, we'll take a look at how things managed to get so bad in Greece, the effects and future sustainability of the euro, and the signs of strong and weak economies. All countries are connected in our global economy, but even countries using a single currency, such as the euro, can have drastic differences. Imports, exports, unemployment, debt levels, and wages can differ greatly. Tying very different countries, such as Germany and Greece, together in one currency has economic consequences and has greatly hurt the Greek economy while benefiting the German economy. First of all, the euro currency was fixed to the respective currencies of all of the member countries in 1999, but the physical currency was not circulated until 2002. Therefore, we'll look at some statistics from World Bank over this transitionary period through the recession and on to today in order to explain what has happened. The population of the peripheral euro countries stated that they were experiencing inflation and a decrease in their standard of living as a result of the introduction of the euro. I personally remember wanting to write a paper studying this topic in 2004. However, the academic community was not open to this viewpoint because most people argued that inflation statistics showed no significant inflation during the early stages of the euro. One theory was that the perceived inflation was much higher than the actual, possibly because many smaller items were simply rounded up and therefore more expensive than previously, but that this did not have a significant impact on overall price levels or standard of living. Small necessities, rounded up, may only add a few dollars to groceries and other bills, which may not change spending habits or raise inflationary red flags. However, when the average European said there was less, if any, money left over at the end of the month than before the introduction of the euro, I believed them. We all know statistics can easily be manipulated to represent a desired viewpoint, and it was not hard for economists and euro members to dismiss these concerns. However, in this case, I trusted the qualitative data much more than the quantitative. Furthermore, if you look at the PPP Conversion Factor, which shows the number of units of a country's currency required to buy the same amount of goods and services in the domestic market as the US dollar would buy in the United States, it is obvious here that leading into the euro introduction in 2002 and onwards, it became more expensive to buy goods and services for these Eurozone countries. Anyone who has ever been to Europe or knows any Europeans knows that their wages in euro are generally much less than the wages in US dollars for a person doing the same job in the US. So the fact that it takes more euros to buy in Europe what the US dollar can buy in the US is an obvious problem. Also, if you look at the harmonized index of consumer prices, there may not be any cause for concern in the Eurozone as a whole. However, it is clear that Greece and Spain have had much more significant increases relative to France and Germany, jumps of roughly 50% compared to increases of 30%. Most economists, academics, and global leaders still shrug these opinions aside. But with an in-depth analysis and some hindsight over a decade later, it is obvious that the population knew better than the people who were supposed to know better. Furthermore, their asset values, such as homes, increased significantly, up to doubling practically overnight for many individuals as a result of the euro. Again, speaking to actual European residents was the best resource, but here are a couple of charts on housing prices in Athens from propertyguide.com to prove this fact. As soon as the euro currency was fixed to the drachma, prices began to rise steadily, up to 20% per year, all the way until the recession, with only one small blip around 2004. You may be thinking, higher home values, isn't that good for Greece and the euro members? Unfortunately, these values aren't unlocked unless the homes are sold, and people need somewhere to live, so the only benefiters of this fact would be speculative investors or house flippers. In addition, new buyers have to be able to afford these houses. We all know unemployment is at dangerous levels in many peripheral Euro countries, and youth unemployment levels in some of these countries has skyrocketed to an absurd 50%, implying basically a lost generation of workers. However, this was not instantly the case. It took several years and was catalyzed by the recession. Initially, the introduction of the euro benefited the weaker economies, lowering their unemployment, and hurt Germany, raising their unemployment. But long term, the economies of countries such as Greece, Spain, and Italy, trading with a currency that is valued much higher than their individual currencies would be, have struggled horribly. Meanwhile, a country such as Germany benefits from trading with a currency that is valued much lower than their individual currency would be, aiding an already strong economy. So the economic gap only widens. How does this all work? Why does the currency matter so much? When the euro was introduced, each euro was exchanged for 340.75 Greek drachma. The euro also began trading worth about $1.17 US. So at this time, $1 US would be worth about 291 drachma. Then, due to the strong euro, by 2008, the euro was worth $1.60 US. So that $1 US would have only been able to get 213 of the old Greek drachma. So why would anyone from the US buy products from Greece? They are considerably more expensive with the 2008 exchange, in fact twice as expensive as they were near the end of the year 2000 when it hit lows. Thus, less people buy Greek. Add to that high unemployment, already dangerously high debt levels, and now kick in a global recession, and this is a recipe for disaster. I remember when Athens hosted the Olympics, they said Greece would be paying these debts for generations to come. They weren't wrong. Greece's debts are much too high, and their GDP cannot possibly grow enough to sustain them. In fact, their GDP is actually decreasing. Individuals in this kind of financial state would claim bankruptcy and start over. And it is becoming commonplace for countries to run up astronomical debts, and defaulting or starting over is a frightening prospect for the debtors. A quick Wikipedia search shows how common sovereign defaults actually are. In the recent history of Europe alone, there have been numerous incidents where governments were unable to pay back all of their debts, and the examples are prevalent in other areas of the world as well. A common theme was war times or global economic crisis, but the point is clear. This can happen at any time to any country. As an aside, here are some tips to weather any crisis. First, keep some cash on hand. Don't store all of your money under your mattress, but have some emergency funds on hand at all times. Second, own physical assets such as property or land in case the fiat currency collapses. Remember, a currency is only as good as a government or economy backing it. Otherwise, it's just paper. And finally, diversify excess capital into multiple investments in currencies. Equities versus fixed income, US dollars versus euro. Generally, when one falls, the other often rises. Now, returning to government debt. A cyclical deficit is considered acceptable during tough economic times, but when a country has a structural deficit that continues to inflate debt levels beyond repair, as we have seen multiple times with Greece, and now may be on the verge of seeing with Puerto Rico, something has to give. Under normal circumstances, at least a weakening currency would stimulate the economy. But Greece is such a tiny portion of the euro that the currency still continues to trade strong while Greece suffers. If it were still on the drachma, for a simple comparison, let's say it would be over 400 drachma to $1 US, the recent trading low from 2000, but likely much too conservative an estimate considering the current Greek economy. approximately double the 213 drachma per US dollar in 2008, and significantly higher than the approximately 310 it is trading at in euro equivalent today, this would represent a meaningful discount in international markets. Thus, people with US dollars, or any other currency, would now be able to buy twice as much from Greece as they could in 2008, with the same amount of money. For example, if I was importing olive oil, one of Greece's biggest exports, into the US from Europe, all of a sudden with my US dollars, I could get the olive oil for half the price, or buy twice as much. It's a simple law of supply and demand. High price, we demand less. Low price, we demand more. So if Greece's currency is devalued, their goods and services will become cheaper, and people will demand more internationally. As a result, all of a sudden the olive oil industry in Greece starts growing. They make more money, hire more people, pay more taxes, and the economy starts doing better. This works to stimulate industry and exports in the country, while also lowering imports, because those Greek drachmas can't buy as much from other countries, such as the US or China, so it's cheaper to produce more in Greece. Unfortunately, one of the biggest problems with Greece and most developed economies is people are highly educated and they expect a certain wage and standard of living. Almost everyone completes secondary school, and a larger and larger portion of the population now completes university or graduate degrees. So they expect to be compensated accordingly. However, on the contrary, there simply are not enough high-skilled jobs for the high-skilled labor forces in many countries, resulting in educated workers remaining unemployed or emigrating to stronger economies. With 50% youth unemployment in many areas of Europe, education is barely being compensated at all. People are complaining that they can't eat, yet nobody wants to go pick the olives and make the olive oil, or do any of these jobs that they consider beneath them. This is a generation that is worse off than their parents, which should never be the case, especially considering the technological advancements we've seen in our lifetime that dwarf the rest of history combined. If we look back to our grandparents or great-grandparents, they had to often walk many miles each way to get clean water, or had to work the land day and night to produce food to eat and trade. Today, we can buy an entire bag of potatoes for $1, turn on a tap and get clean drinking water for fractions of a penny, or can find the answers to almost any question imaginable on a smartphone fitting in the palm of our hand. Artificially inflated asset prices and wages in some areas have led to a greater and greater income gap, leading to the same exponential increase in frustration by most of the working class. You can see in the Eurozone alone, there is a gigantic gap in GDP per capita, and thus standard of living between various countries. As I mentioned earlier, you have a generation of people who can never afford home ownership. Some global cities have average housing prices over $1 million, so no matter how strong an economy is, the lower working class can never afford this basic luxury. Fortunately, for Europe, many homes are passed down from generation to generation, and mortgage debt is insignificant compared to North America. However, I warn that the Greek crisis is not an isolated incident. No country is immune. The Americas are what I like to call new economies. We are still developing primary resources because we have not depleted our top commodities over thousands of years as Europe has. Countries such as Canada and Australia have tiny populations, massive amounts of resources, and as a result, times have been good. In general, these types of economies experience higher highs, but they also experience lower lows. When these resources run dry, or are no longer in such high demand, example, oil right now, then all of a sudden huge sectors of the economy shrink. People are laid off, tax revenues decrease, dependency on social welfare programs increases, and all of a sudden governments and populations that were spending carelessly, enjoying the good times, have to change their ways before it becomes too late. For Greece, they are on the verge of it being too late. They can't keep the same pension ages and benefits and tax rates. Their easy times are over. If they want to get their standard of living back, they're going to have to work for it. You have made your stand, now you must act and be physically productive. Unemployed young people don't sit at home and sulk or protest in the streets. Do something that helps yourself and the economy. If you don't have any food, go harvest the land, whether you or your family has land, or if there is some that is unowned or owned by an elderly person who cannot harvest it themselves. Produce something of physical, tangible value from otherwise unused, inefficient resources. The entire global economy needs to get back to valuing an honest day's work. Not everyone can live off the proverbial government tea. An economy needs productivity that it can tax in order to provide public services and jobs. You cannot have everyone wanting to work a white-collar government job with nobody in manufacturing, agriculture, and all of the primary industries. The U.S. economy is strong and has rebounded from the recent recession quickly because the private sector is so strong. American businesses continue to produce and sell to the rest of the world, and the U.S. consumer always keeps buying, and buying American. The velocity of money in the U.S. is what keeps their economy booming. Even though the population spends excessively and can get to dangerous debt levels, the spending goes mostly to U.S. corporations, which in turn hire U.S. employees who pay U.S. taxes and consume more goods and services, so the cycle is reinforced. Europe, on the other hand, has a much lower velocity of money. And why would people spend when employment and wage levels are so poor and prices might even get cheaper with the dreaded deflation? Germany excels in Europe because it has a strong private sector, it is productive, efficient, and manufactures physical goods that it exports, now at cheaper levels because of the euro. Ironically, economics is derived from Greek, and one of the definitions is a study of how individuals, governments, firms, and nations make choices in order to allocate scarce resources to satisfy their unlimited wants. Every country has unlimited wants, but which countries are using their limited resources most effectively and efficiently? The US and Germany, or Greece, Spain, and Italy? The solution isn't simple. Changes must be made, but you cannot just cut some benefits and tax your way out of this. Several Eurozone countries already have high tax revenue to GDP percentages, and they cannot sustain much higher. When France brought about the idea of an absurd 75% tax rate on income over $1 million, French actor Gérard Depardieu quickly became a Russian citizen, where he would only pay a 13% tax rate. One person is not a concern, but he was making a point that the people would not stand for this. It would be the same situation from large corporations to small business owners, because it would be cheaper to do business elsewhere. Until there are international labor and tax laws, there will always be some countries that have advantages and disadvantages. If conditions in one country become too poor relative to another, they may lose resources to this other country, whether it is people, capital, or goods and services. Countries such as Bangladesh, with minuscule wages and horrible working conditions, dominate the apparel industry, and no developed country can compete, not even China. But every country still needs sectors that are internationally competitive, and it's a government's job to keep its industries competitive and thriving. I don't recommend overly protectionist policies. Mercantilism doesn't even work in theory, but some subsidies or government intervention can provide great payoffs if they can lay the groundwork for long-term, successful domestic industry. Countries such as the US and Germany have plenty of these companies and industries, and every country needs to find what they do best. For Greece, I'm not sure what it is, but they need to find something soon. In summary, I don't believe the euro can continue to exist long-term without more coordination between member nations. There cannot be such divergence in unemployment, wages, GDP per capita, and debt levels while still maintaining a common currency. This video was not designed with any opinion in mind, but simply as an unbiased analysis of the facts and statistics. Upon this analysis, it seems the costs outweigh the benefits of the single euro currency in its current form. Why do we need the euro? For travel and tourism? Well, digital currency is already replacing the need for most physical cash, so this is no longer a valid argument. To improve trade relations? There are already free trade agreements in place amongst European nations, and a common currency is not needed to encourage trade. To have a stronger presence in the global economy, possibly as a reserve currency? Well, the US is still where everyone flees in the time of crisis, and their dollar is still the reserve currency of choice. To improve growth as well as price and economic stability? Clearly the exact opposite has been the net effect. I don't see any positive advantages to the euro that warrant the current struggles, which are intensified due to the single currency. The euro is going to benefit the stronger economies that don't require this benefit and hurt the weaker economies that can't afford to be hurt. Make no mistake, the short-term headache of any country leaving the eurozone, let alone a full dissolution of the currency, is not to be underestimated. However, it may be a necessary course of action for the long-term health of these weaker economies, and this viewpoint is starting to gain some traction. It is clear that without the eurozone acting much more unilaterally as one economy, there is no reason for them to act as one currency. Thank you for watching. Now please share, and then go do something productive for yourself, your family, and your economy. Follow @DayTradeCanada, and also visit the website.